On this episode of Industry Relations Podcast, Rob and I talk about why Northwest MLS's new listing agreement changes everything. Let's go. This is Industry Relations, a podcast that's at the intersection of real estate and technology from an insider's perspective, with Rob Hahn and Greg Robertson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Industry Relations with Rob and Greg. This is obviously your co-host, the Notorious Rob. And he is back from vacation, the fabulous Greg Robertson. So, obviously, we got to start with that. How was it, man? And what is that you are shaking in front of the camera for people listening on the pod?
Well, I got back. It was my wife's 50th birthday, so I took her to Greece on a cruise.
Wonderful.
It was a bit too bougie for my taste, actually, but I mean,
oh, really?
Enjoyed it. I haven't really traveled internationally really much. I mean, I went to a wedding in Italy once, and that's about it. And we were kind of one location.
Yeah.
But you know, it was great. We got on a boat, and then you go to an island, and then you go explore the island, go get some tours, and then you get back.
Yeah.
Sail in the middle of the night. You wake up at another island, and you know, a little bit hot. I mean, I guess this type of year isn't ideal because it's hot.
Okay.
But, and you know, there's other bit much.
But I've heard Greek beaches are like amazing though.
Well, they're not the white sandy ones you think about, but I mean the islands. I mean they're more because it's more in a volcanic area, right?
Okay.
But you know the tavernas, the shops. You know, we went and explored a couple of wineries in one of the islands. I guess my favorite island was probably Mykonos. I just love the vibe and the look of that city and the architecture of it, the white, you know, the white houses and everything, and a lot more of the culture. We also had a stop in in Turkey, and we were able to visit Ephesus, which was an ancient kind of Greek Roman city. And you know, we got a great tour guide who was a former professor of Roman and Greek history.
Wow!
And on that street, on the main thoroughway through Ephesus, if those have gone there, they know from reading some of the accounts that was the first time that Mark Antony met Cleopatra.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah, and, you know, you read about this shit, and you don't. Yeah. Then when you're in it, and then we went to Patmos, which was the island where John the Baptist got sent, and we were in the cave that he supposedly wrote the book Revelations.
Oh wow!
In the same, you know,
that's awesome, man.
Fuck of all that kind of stuff, and and then this thing here, this is from Athens or from Greece, I should say, and this is a kumbaloi, and it's basically like a fidget toy from Greek culture, where you know you can spin it around, or you can like almost a rosary. You can count the beads. It's a fiddler device. It's like worry beads in that kind of thing. So I got one that's made of this evil eye, but it's the eye is basically supposed to ward off evil, not attract it. So that's what I was doing.
So you went all the way to Greece, and you brought back worry beads that repel evil.
Correct.
That's something about your mindset.
And memories.
The fabulous Greg Robertson is consumed with anxiety and worry about evil.
You know, it's I guess I'm a little superstitious, not a lot, but you know, can't hurt, right?
Well, welcome back, man. You look great. Hopefully that was a restful, relaxing vacation.
Yeah,
and,
we had a 27-hour travel day coming back. So it's Friday now. We got back on early Sunday morning. Like we landed like at 2:00 in the morning.
Yes.
So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday was not a good situation, but I'm feeling better now.
All right. Well, good. Cause you know, Inman's coming up. So you need to be, you know, on top form. But we're not going to talk about
Inman or what? Are you logged?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
All right.
That's what I would do anyway. So I will see you in Las Vegas, you know?
Absolutely.
Maybe we'll have to try and see, I have been looking around. There's some potential karaoke spots. So yeah, I'm just saying.
Oh, good Lord. I mean, I don't know about the one that we normally go to. I don't think they have a full bar there.
No, I don't think, at least not in Las Vegas. I can't find one. I'll see. I'll look around. in case. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying, just in case.
Not Thursday night. Okay, just FYI.
In any event, so there are some things that I think are worth discussing.
Yep.
And while you were gone, Northwest MLS has come out with a very interesting announcement, and I believe we have the screen pulled up. So let's just go through it real quick.
I'm going to do this, and so everybody, please forgive me for. Rob normally does this screen share shit, but.
Dun, dun, dun. So for people who are listening only, number one, you should come check us out on YouTube so you can see all the screens. But number two, basically, this is a story from Min saying that Northwest MLS, the Seattle-based, privately owned, broker-owned MLS, eliminates broker commission sharing as default. So I will hand it over to you, Greg. What are they doing?
Well, as it says in the subtext, it's like effective October, Northwest MLS forms will specify that buyer broker compensation will come directly from sellers and offer new options on how listing agents and buyers will be paid. They have at the bottom here, kind of an example of what that, a sample of what that potentially could look like. And if it's hard to kind of read here, but it says compensation, right? Listing. Right. Buyer's broker firm compensation, dual agency, non-member buyer brokerage firm. It's just a lot to kind of parse out. But I think basically what they're trying to do, here we go. Buyer brokerage firm's compensation, no compensation offered by seller. It's a check mark. Additional buyer brokerage firm compensation, buyer's representation agreement, credit to buyer, reduction. So they're breaking out all basically the ways that are out, the different models, and like just summarizing it and put them as options in the listing agreement to make it very clear, right, that there are multiple ways, myriads of ways of doing. And then there's like an other section here, right? So write your own kind of, roll your own kind of what kind of a offer of compensation you're giving that. So
right.
And what's the thing that's interesting to me is like what I really want to understand is like, the guys, Tom Hurtlebrink has been there for a while, Justin over there, and Monica. I mean, great group of people. But they're a broker-owned MLS. They're not part of NAR. So they were the first ones to actually put, I believe they're the first ones to put the percentage of the buyer's compensation percentage included on the IDX feeds for that.
That's right.
For their brokers. And this is another thing, again, I think they're really leading the pack here. And, is it because they're not related to NAR? Yeah. But I really want to understand is this something like the staff that Tom and Justin and those guys are really sending forth to their kind of members? Or, as we know in that area, there's like, 3 or 4 just very strong brokerages, John L. Scott, Windermere, I think there's a Coldwell Banker,
Coldwell Banker. Yep.
Those are biggies up there, right? So are they driving it? Or Redfin? Redfin, I keep on hearing maybe Redfin is a little bit behind this. So
Zillow, they're up in Seattle.
Yeah.
EXP's up in Bellingham.
Yeah. I mean, there's a cauldron there, right? So it's like I'm not sure. I asked Tom, not to call him out here on the TAM podcast. I mean, because I said I'd love to have him on my podcast or this podcast.
Yep.
Because I love, the conversations like we have helps me learn.
Yeah.
But they haven't launched this yet, right? So they're not really ready to kind of talk freeform because I think the cement isn't really totally dry yet.
Right.
On this, but hopefully, come October, we can get somebody from Northwest MLS to do this. But
right.
I think it's there was another article. I don't think I can bring this up here. I think that Bernice wrote that basically says, hey, if other MLSs adopt this, a lot of these things are really making, all the kind of claims that some of these lawsuits are doing kind of moot, or at least less so, right? So
potentially,
potentially correct.
Yeah.
So
depending on all sorts of little details. So the first, I guess, question I have is, and if you know, if you don't, because the story sounds like this is a done deal. In other words, they haven't launched it, right? So they're going to launch this effective October 3rd, but it feels like this particular set of changes and these rules are done. Like, in other words, these aren't just proposals right? Like they're not just thinking about doing this; they've already done it, and they're going to launch it. Right?
I mean, think about any policy type of thing, and maybe I can stop sharing the screen here. Any sort of policy changes, I think NAR does this. A lot of governing bodies do this. They're going to put something out there. They're going to wait. This is a good opportunity to get feedback from the membership, from the community, from the industry, and then. But I think you're right. I think there's a change coming here. I think the cement is a little bit, wet here in that they're giving themselves some room until October. If somebody does squawk and say or find something that they may have missed, they can make some adjustments here. But I think overall, I think
this is done.
This is done. They're going for it.
Yeah, because that's what I read. It wasn't this wasn't Tom and Northwest MLS saying, "Hey, we want to explore this idea." Like let's have a workshop around this. This is here's what we're doing, right? It's going to happen in October. So it gives a little time in case somebody comes up with something dramatic, but this is going to happen. So that's number one. Number two, you and I have discussed in the context of the whole commission lawsuit, various ways that the industry could handle, sort of a post compensation type world. I mean, so I'll kind of ask you, what do you think this is an effective answer to those problems, right?
Well, I think this is one in many. For Northwest MLS has been out there, I'll say it, in a leadership position. I mean, first of all, they don't require buyer's compensation at Northwest MLS. Remember we talked about that? Right. I was surprised. So along the way, we've been discovering that all these kind of boogeymen about if this changes, the whole industry blows up, or that changes, the whole industry blows up. Well, okay, if let's just put these boogeymen out there and that's related to Northwest MLS. If you don't require buyer's compensation, the MLS is going to fall apart. Northwest MLS has been doing that for a long time. Not true. If you're too transparent about the buyer's compensation, the percentage wise, out there in the world, that's going to cause a lot of problems. They've been doing that. Has not happened. So now we're going to be as transparent as we can in the listing agreement about what the kind of options are and show the potential buyer how it works, right? I mean, we're taking away the kind of the curtain here in a way, drawing the curtain back a little bit. And again, maybe that might show again that, hey, maybe this new world we've all been afraid of is not really that big of a deal, right? And they're just, I think, step by step showing us this, right? So, yeah, I think it's not just one thing. I think there's several things that they've been doing that have been kind of like peeling the onion of all this.
Well, so the specific question I had in mind, Greg, was one of the things you had talked about was how if, let's say, either the lawsuits or the FTC or whoever comes in and says, hey, you know what, no more commission sharing, right? One of the things you had said was in order to solve that, we need the mortgage company, we need Fannie and Freddie to allow the buyer compensation to be rolled into mortgage. Okay. Yeah. Well, here's Northwest MLS saying we're not doing that, right? Because obviously they don't control mortgage rules. All they're saying is if there's buyer compensation or buyer broker compensation of any kind, it comes directly from the seller, not from the listing agent.
Right.
Does that, in your mind, do away with the need to muck around with mortgages? I guess is what I'm wondering. Yeah,
great question. So here's what I think, right? Again, these are stair steps, right? They need to do something. They're not going to change the mortgage industry overnight.
Right.
So they got to frame this in a way that, still the seller is doing this, but we're going to be transparent about what that can be, right? So now let's say that they launch this and this is successful. This new transparency, this new listing agreement actually solves a lot of the major problems that some of these people are having. There's also something, if you remember, I didn't mention here, that has a way for non-participating agents to show houses too, which is a big one of Rex's concerns. I'm a little bit more fuzzy on that, but just going back to my point, if something like this is successful, then maybe we're not going to need such an overhaul in the kind of mortgage industry of that. But I think if it's the case, well, if the ruling does come down, they can't, well, then that's going to have to change anyway. And all these things are going to take time. This ruling's going to come down and then the industry has to adjust. Right. And I think there's going to be the mortgage companies are going to come up with a way.
I agree. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess there are a number of questions that come out of that for me. Number one is, do we think that sellers would be willing to directly pay the buyer's agent?
Well, they're doing it now.
No, they're not. They're paying their listing agent, and the listing agent is sharing with the buyer agent.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Under this new rule, what Northwest is saying, okay, no, it's not that. So it's no longer 6% to your buyer agent, your listing agent, and then the listing agent is going to share that 6% with the buyer agent. Right now, you're going to pay the listing agent 3%, and you are promised to pay 3% to the buyer agent. So it's direct from the seller.
It was always that, but this is just making it more transparent of how it was going to be done, right?
No, that's my point. It was never that, right? So the claim that NAR, one of the defenses is, look, hey, seller, you have a listing agreement. You have a contract with the listing agent, right? To pay them 6%. What the listing agent does with the 6% afterwards is none of your concern, right? So part of this was, and this is at the heart of the lawsuit, where the plaintiffs are saying, oh my God, we were forced to pay 6% because of all your anti-competitive rules. The industry is saying, shut the fuck up. I mean, you agreed to pay 6%, right? Why are you coming back now and complaining about it now, right? What Northwest is saying is, okay, you know what we're going to do? Your agreement with the listing agent is for 3%, and then you're going to do a separate agreement with the buyer's agent to pay them 3%, right? So it's actually totally different. It goes beyond transparency. The character is different.
Yeah, I mean, I think the end result is the same, right?
End result is the same, correct.
Yeah, that's all I was getting to. But again, correct. I think it's okay to be more transparent and more, whatever the word you were using.
Right.
But the end result is going to be the same.
So that's the question. The question then is, how do you think sellers would be willing, right, once it's become transparent, say, I'll pay 3% to the buyer's agent?
Yeah,
we don't know, right?
We don't know. I mean, it's a beautiful experiment. I mean, this is going to be interesting, and I'm glad this is going to happen, right? I'm glad that they didn't require buyers to offer sellers to offer buyers compensation. I'm glad they were the first ones to display the buyer's compensation percentage, right? Agent compensation. I'm glad they're doing this because we're going to learn more about this. Again, going back to earlier conversations, I think that this is it's gonna fly. I think the inertia behind the model we have in the U.S. is so strong that this is going to be like, it's going to be check, fill in the 3% there, sign this, right? And even though it's more transparent, the way people are in these kind of transactions, sometimes it might be the biggest purchase in the world, but they're not really engaged a lot. They're just
so. Let's take it to the next step. I agree, by the way. I love that Northwest MLS is doing this. There's a part of me that feels like we should have seen more experimentation, right? Like, why aren't other broker-owned MLSs trying new things so we could see what works, what doesn't work? Right?
What broker-owned MLSs? That's broker-owned, right? Key. Correct. Yeah.
Right. That raised a whole separate question, but I don't want to go there just yet, right? The question I have then becomes, okay, what we know from the lawsuits, what we know from industry practice, that listing agents for decades have been taught, coached, trained. Here's how you overcome a listing objection, commission objection, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean,
okay. Under this rule,
not every agent, not every franchisor, not whatever,
but it's been a very common coaching script. It's been a very common thing. Let's not pretend that it hasn't been. It has been. I'm not saying that agents used it. This was the way that it was taught, right?
Okay. There's a million ways, a million coaches, a million coaching books, a million coaching strategies. And yes, in some of those things, that type of what you're about to talk about is some agents have practiced for sure.
It's just the fact that coaches and organizations have taught this particular method, right?
Right.
That is no longer going to work under what Northwest is proposing.
Correct.
Right. By the way, so what we're talking about is what they would say is, hey, listen, I charge 3%, and sure, we could offer out less to a buyer's agent, but if you do, they're not going to show your house. So you don't want to do that. Let's keep it at the 6%. I mean, that was the past sort of, the coaching scripts. Okay. Under this, though,
or they would say something like it's free. The seller's paying all the commissions free.
The buyer, right, and they're not allowed to do it anymore. Okay. So under this model, what I'm wondering is, okay, now as a listing agent, you say, listen, I charge 3%. You can offer whatever you want to offer to the buyer's agent, right? I guess the question is, do they still say if you don't offer 3% to the buyer's agent, they are not going to show your house? They are not going to be incentivized properly to sort of convince their buyer to that they should buy this house. You got muted. You're muted.
Sorry. I mean, if I'm an MLS or I'm a brokerage, I would strongly train my agents not to use that strategy.
Right.
It could be used, but again, they should be stopping that method right now if they haven't, and actively talking about the challenges the industry is facing right now, and not make situations worse. Right. But no, they could, Rob. I mean, absolutely, they could continue that strategy if they thought that was best for them. I don't think it's good for them, but there's a lot of things they still could do with the way that Northwest MLS has outlined this. Yes, absolutely.
Right. So presumably what we should see after October, after Northwest MLS puts this rule in, is listing agents no longer recommending paying buyer agents. Right?
Well, I mean, I don't know about that.
Well, so the question is, why would a listing agent recommend that the seller pay the buyer agent? Because now it's direct payment. Now it's not, I'm sharing my commission with the buyer agent. Now it's, hey, seller, you should offer the buyer agent compensation.
Well, okay, here's how I'll put it. It brings a pause. It's something that they didn't have to think about before. Now they're going to have to think about, right? So I'm not sure it's the role of the seller, the seller's agent to recommend they don't pay, right? I think it's the role of the seller to say, here are the options for paying the buyer. Hey, everybody. I'm so excited to announce our inaugural sponsor of the Industry Relations podcast, NoteRouter. NoteRouter was launched back in 2018 by Nick Goff, and they had the mission of reconnecting real estate. NoteRouter is an all-in-one email and texting platform designed exclusively for real estate. NoteRouter syncs with your membership database to make communicating with your members easier and more effective. Believe me, your staff is going to love you for this. If you're an association or MLS and you want to do a better job with communicating with members, really look no further. They've just launched a brand new website. It looks fantastic, by the way. I'll put the URL in the show notes. It's NoteRouter.com. Go there, take a look. You'll find everything you need. Once again, thank you, Nick. Thank you to everybody at NoteRouter for sponsoring the Industry Relations podcast. Rob and I truly appreciate your support. Let's step outside ourselves and let's project ourselves into that situation.
Sure.
I'm selling my house.
You're selling your house. I'm the agent. Okay.
Right.
Or yeah, it's like, why would I? Hey, so Greg, wonderful house. We're gonna list it. I'm gonna do all these things for you. I charge 3%.
Right.
You say cool. All right.
Now there's different ways. There's.
So let's reverse it. I'm the homeowner. Okay. You're my agent.
Yeah.
Greg, you seem wonderful. Cool. And what do you charge?
3%.
Cool. You're worth it. Sure. Done. Okay. Now.
Okay. Here's the listing agreement.
Yeah.
There's different options as far as for paying for the buyer. I think at this point, though, I would say, Rob, the seller would say to me, "What do you?"
I would say, wait. I would say to you, first of all, my question would be, why am I paying the buyer agent?
Right. Well, and then there's a lot of good things about there. A lot of agents.
Right. So let's play this out. What would your answer to me? Why am I paying the buyer?
Why am I paying the buyer's agent?
Right. Why am I paying the buyer or the buyer's agent?
Right. You're paying the buyer's agent because they have buyers that are looking for homes like this, instead of like just putting it out in the open market and see what happens. These guys, these agents are looking for buyers that they're looking for homes like yours, and this could be a quick and easier deal to get done if we work, directly with a buyer's agent.
So why is the buyer paying the buyer's agent? Why is that my problem?
I don't follow you.
Like, why am I paying the buyer's agent?
Right.
Right. Because that would be the first question I think the sellers would ask.
Right. Well, I guess, to me, and again, this is what I was kind of starting to say here, is I think the agent, the seller's agent, doesn't want to get involved in that conversation. And I think what's going to typically happen is the seller's agent is going to say, well, because I think the seller's going to ask, well, what's standard here? It says typically it's typically it's a percentage for their services. It's negotiable.
See, I don't know, Greg. See, I think it's standard and it's all that because sellers have never been presented this option before, right? Sellers have never been presented the option of, hey, you should pay the buyer agent. That never comes up. It's just more like, here's the commission and there's cooperative compensation and we offer out this and compensate, but I offer it out, right, at the listing broker. The conversation has typically, I don't think has been, hey, Mr. Seller, you should pay the buyer agent, right? And the context that's come up in the sort of list overcoming the commission objection is all the stuff that you and I just talked about, how you think that's a bad idea. You don't want to get involved, right? So under the Northwest MLS model, I'm just trying to imagine the scenario where the listing agent would tell their client, the homeowner, hey, Mr. Homeowner, you should pay the buyer agent. I have a tough time imagining how that conversation goes.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, it's interesting being in sales. I mean, sales is all about is overcoming objections and going back. Right. So in the case of this, I guess I'll walk back a little bit of what I said, because if I'm in a sales situation like this, I would say, well, let me ask you a question. If you had a bunch of buyers looking for houses in this neighborhood, right? Would it be, I guess if you go down that road, it's a steering. It's a
exactly, right?
No,
exactly. So I guess what I look at, again, I love the fact that Northwest is doing this, and I can't wait to see what the result is after a year or two, right? Well, my gut tells me that I think listing agents shut the fuck up about buyer agents. I think they just go, it's your choice, do whatever you want.
Yeah, okay, so let's say they do. Now they're presented with these, and I'm gonna share my screen again here.
Yeah.
Show this. This is again a great conversation. All right, so the first check mark is no compensation offered by the seller. Right. So yeah, I'm not paying anything. 3% sounds great. Right. And I guess so what happens? Let's say they do that. They put the listing out, and they get no activity, no showings, no anything.
They go to the listing agent. Hey, why am I not seeing any showings?
Well, yeah, I mean, exactly. Can they prove that is because there's no offer of compensation to the buyer's agent? I mean, is that'd be pretty hard to prove, wouldn't it?
I don't even know. Like, all I'm saying is, like, you call the listing agent and you say, hey, so how come I'm not getting any action? And the listing agent goes, because you're not offering any compensation. Right. Because let's put it this way. The listing agent's not going to say, well, it's because I suck at marketing.
Okay, but here's where when in the current model, when you're not being as overly transparent here.
Yeah.
Right. And you're using those same script. Well, nobody's going to show it. Right. Is that different from being completely transparent, like with this form, and then saying now, well, if you're not going to offer any compensation to the buyer's agent, you might get less showings. They're not. It's an apples oranges situation. One, you're cloaking the fact of what that relationship is. Here, you're fully disclosing, and then you're adding some context to it. Right. Are those? Again, I'm walking back here again. As I think about it, are those two of the same thing here?
No, I think what Northwest is doing, it would then be better, right? In other words, the listing agent. So the seller says, "How come I'm not seeing any action?" And the listing agent goes, "Because you're not offering any compensation." Right? And then the seller could be like, "Well, that's crappy. That feels like the buyer agents are doing something bad." But at least he's not blaming the listing agent, right? The listing agent's being completely transparent, saying, "Hey, man, here's the deal, right? I've done my job and I've marketed, but you're not offering any compensation, and buyer agents steer, so that's what's happening," right?
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing here, it's like I was going to say, buy this house and you get a free, Corvette with it, but that would go to the buyer, not the
right
agent, right? So,
And that's the other option that Northwest is talking about. It's like, look, you could always have it where buyers, they've signed a buyer exclusive buyer agency.
You have a check mark for that, right?
Right. So the buyer's like, I got to pay my agent, whatever, right? 3%. So, hey, seller, can you give me 3% so I can pay my...
and they do say that in the article here. They believe, and it'll be time will tell, that they think this is going to increase the amount of these exclusivity agreements.
Sure.
That the agents are going to put in there. So the question will already be answered with these buyer exclusive agreements, right?
Sure. I mean, I think, and that's becoming a more and more common practice just across the industry anyway. And I think that's all positive, right? Yeah. I guess I was just looking at it in a couple of ways. Number one, once this is put in place, I can't imagine a listing agent recommending to their seller that they pay the buyer agent, right? Because it's like, why do you even want to go down that road, right? As a listing agent, you've done your job. You say, hey, I will market and sell your home. Sign this listing agreement. 3%, cool, right? Now the commission conversation is about why you deserve the 3%, right? That's, I'm going to do this for you. I have 30 years experience, blah, 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 right? So maybe you cut it to 2.5, maybe 2, whatever, but it's strictly between the listing agent and the homeowner, right? Has nothing to do with the buyer agents. It's just straight up, I'm the best listing agent in this market. I charge 3%. Here's all the wonderful stuff I do for you. You should pay me. So it's, yeah, okay, that seems reasonable. Or I'm a new agent and I'm going to work hard for you, but I'll only charge you 1%.
Right.
And the seller's like, cool, that's fine. I want a discount. Fine. That's between the listing agent and the seller, free market in action. I don't think the buyer agent compensation would enter that whole scenario after this because it's fully transparent.
Yeah.
Except to the extent that here are your options. What do you want to do? And the seller's like, well, what should I do? As a listing agent, man, if you say, well, you should offer compensation because otherwise buyer agents are not going to show this house, that's dangerous. That's one of those, like, woo.
So 2 things. I love this conversation that you're you expertly walk me down into the fucking trap.
There's no trap. I don't know the trap. I want to know too.
And kudos to you, right? So what about this situation, right? I mean, I agree with what you're saying. This is fascinating. But is it a thing to say, like, what about a situation where, okay, a buyer comes up, doesn't have an agent, I want to buy this.
Yep. Right?
And the agent goes, okay, submit me an offer.
Yep.
What does that mean?
Yep.
Blah, 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 blah. The selling agent, in some sense, could spin this around to say, listen, we run the risk here of getting some Yahoo off of Zillow who is going to call me direct and say, I want to buy this house. He's not going to be represented. And this is going to make this whole process a lot more difficult.
Yep.
Right? Because he doesn't know what an offer is. He doesn't have the forms. It's just, you're working with, like, it's like defending yourself in a court of law when you're not an attorney, right? I mean, I would recommend to you that we offer some sort of compensation so that we can, that agents, well, yeah, I mean, you're a little bit of a trap there too, right? But there is a reason, I think, you were asking me, why would I do this? If I'm an agent, I would say, well, I'd rather work with another agent because they know what they're doing, or they should be knowing what they're doing, right? So there's a professional kind of aspect to this, right?
Right.
But I mean, I don't know if I would go far away. Well, I'd rather work with another agent, right? So any sort of incentives we can have there for more agents to show up to the party than just randos, I'm all for. But it's up to you. I mean, I don't even know if that goes too far, right?
So one of the interesting things about that is the way I imagine all of that playing out is the listing agent, if they're being ethical, right? Some rando buyer shows up. Hey, I want to buy this house. Hey, cool. Who's your agent? I don't have an agent. Hey, listen, Mr. Jones, I strongly recommend you have an agent, right? Because this is very complicated, blah, 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 right? And here's a list of great agents in our area, right? Why don't you call one of them up?
Right.
Cool. Mr. Jones calls one of them up and says, yeah, I'd be happy to represent you. Here's my exclusive buyer agreement. It's 3%. Mr. Jones and the buyer agent, they go back and forth. They negotiate something. They agree on 3%. Cool. And I think then during the negotiation, Jones comes back, right? says, hey, I don't got money to pay this guy, right? Hey, seller, if you want this deal, here's my offer.
Sure.
You're going to need to kick me $50,000 so I can pay my agent.
Their new agent should be doing that.
Sure, right. Or whatever, right? Yeah. So that's a credit to the buyer.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening at the listing stage. In other words, the listing agreement that Northwest has, it has one of the options is something like the seller will pay the buyer this percentage. I don't see that happening at that stage.
Well, that's fine. Right? I mean, they could just check mark the first checkbox, no compensation thing, and then no, later on it's going to be freaking adjusted.
During the transaction, there'll be a negotiated item back and forth, and the listing agent's like, hey, listen, Mr. Jones has the best offer here, right? You should take this offer. He can't afford to pay his agent. Why don't you kick him 3%? Do you know what I mean? Like, I see it happening at that stage, not at the front end, at the listing stage.
Friction. I mean, so we always knew it would be more friction, right?
Right.
But the lesson learned here, if I'm John L. Scott and I'm Windermere, if I'm Red, I mean, really, I guess John L. Scott and Windermere, or Cole Banker, or any brokerage in the Northwest MLS coverage area, I would immediately start training their buyer agents on how to, coach them on how to get exclusive buyer representation agreement today. Yeah. So they should be prepared anytime they work with any buyer, to have that document in place, right? I know talking to a lot of agents, to me, what I hear the best practices is it's always they only want to present that. They want to take buyers on without any without any paperwork, but when the buyer wants to make an offer, that's what I hear when the agents want to kind of put that forward, right? So it's not going to make an immediate change, but there's got to be some coaching, there's got to be some scripts to help those agents, coax buyers into signing that agreement.
All right. Hey, sorry, I guess I'm back from this computer crash. Last thing I heard, Greg, you were in fine form talking about if you were a broker in Seattle, in Northwest MLS, do some training. So, and then obviously I got lost. So
yeah. All I'm saying is that if you're one of any brokerage in that area, and let's talk about it, the change is coming, right? The times they are changing. So if I'm any brokerages, I would be upping my training with all my agents on getting, what are the best practices for getting buyers to sign an exclusive agreement, right?
I completely agree.
Because this listing agreement is going to change. If it goes in this direction, this is a great experiment. God, this is fantastic for this to happen. It's going to be very, it's going to be key that these buyers, you get them under contract as well.
So there are a couple of things to think about there, though, right? And I will preface this by saying, I am a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer. And certainly the law of agency is not my area, right? Once we move towards this notion of, exclusive buyer agency agreements, and the buyer fundamentally pays the buyer agent, right? And potentially the seller will give a credit to the buyer, to make the deal work, right? I think the two things I think about is, one, I'm very uncomfortable at that point with the idea of the seller directly paying the buyer's agent, right? The Northwest MLS model, one of the things it contemplates is the seller would offer compensation to the buyer agent directly instead of through the listing agent. Because then I think you really raise whose client, who are you really representing, right?
Right.
It really does raise that. So in an exclusive buyer agency, as you're negotiating, you go to your buyer, hey, listen, I'm going to work for you. Here's what I charge, etc. I actually think you have to leave out this notion of, and if the seller offers me compensation, you don't have to pay me. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because there's something like, again, in the legal world, this would never be allowed, right? It would never be allowed. The defendant is paying me directly, so don't you worry. Like that's just conflict of interest.
Well, I must feel that that's just a device or mechanism to get out of having to get the mortgage shit figured out now, right? I almost feel this is like it's just a device to make this work now. But I think in the future, you're probably going to see that go away. But that's the only way they can get this out there. Sure. And I think your concern is valid, but I also think what we're going to learn from this is so valuable that it's worth
yeah.
Of like,
Completely. Across the board, I love the fact that Northwest is doing this. We can't wait to see what the result is, right? We're just having this conversation. So as you're doing this training around the exclusive buyer agency and blah, 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 I completely agree that you should do that. I'm just pointing out, go talk to your attorney. And number one, I think there might be a problem if in that exclusive buyer agency discussion, the buyer agent says to the buyer, hey, and if the seller offers compensation, you don't have to pay. I would be very, very, very careful about that. I would be really nervous about how that affects law of agency. The second thing, though.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just thinking out loud, like the different scenarios. Like, okay, he puts in here, I'll give $5,000 to the buyer agent, just a set amount. But the buyer's agent has a percentage. They have a listing agreement, a buyer's exclusive agreement with their buyer, for a percentage. I guess, are they crediting I mean, who knows what's going to happen in those situations, right?
Who knows?
It's going to be I think some brokers are going to interpret it one way and other brokers are going to interpret it another way, right?
Look, I think the best practice in that scenario, just logically speaking, is the listing agent should never put in the seller will credit $5,000 to the buyer, because it's going to come up in a negotiated context anyway, where the buyer will come and say, hey, listen, I promised 3% to my agent, so I'm going to need $15,000 or whatever, $25,000 from the seller to make this work. And then it's just going to be a back and forth negotiation to figure that out. Right? Yeah. So I would never put that in the listing agreement anyway, right? Yeah. Up front. The second thing, though, with the exclusive buyer agency, okay, now that we have moved to this, the idea of I'm going to represent you, Mr. Buyer, and you are going to pay me, right? I would have some real questions as to percentages.
Right? Yeah.
Right? Yeah. No, because it doesn't make sense. Like you're hiring me to represent your interests as the buyer, but I'm going to get paid based on the price that you're paying. That doesn't actually make sense, right? Yeah. So one of the things to think about for brokerages in the Northwest area as kind of the pioneers for this is you might want to start really having conversations around, I'm going to charge you $10,000 flat fee, right? I'm going to charge you by the hour. Because this buyer agency and percentage, I was never comfortable with it, right?
Yeah. So I think you're right. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. And it's going to be a petri dish kind of experiment there. And I imagine as being the forms provider for Northwest MLS, Lone Wolf, that might be getting a lot of business of their listing agreement from October to whenever as they figure things out. So I think that's right. So, I know we're running kind of on time. So how about this? I would like to encourage the other broker in the MLSs to do what Northwest is doing, because boy, wouldn't it be great? And maybe try some different things, right? Like MLS PIN, let's see, are there any difference between the Northeast and Northwest? Right. And there are FMLS in Atlanta. Could you guys do something here where we could see? They have a totally different model with that's true. They're completely. But other broker-owned MLS, I would love to see. Maybe they should do some experiments so we all could learn. MLS, one of those. What's that? Metro MLS in Milwaukee, is that broker-owned? I don't know. I know there's one in the Pittsburgh area. Step Up. Yeah. Step Up. I mean, just try some new things and let Northwest kind of lead the way. So we all could learn like what works, what doesn't, and there are kind of a lot of things we learn from this. So, listen, I another great one. I mean, this is so good for me as the 5-year-old, and I get to talk to you and like flush these things out. I love it when I have this preconceived, notion of how I'm looking at things, and then you expertly, like I said, walk me down that road. And I swear to you, there's no road, there's no trap. I'm just as curious as you are. No, but I mean, I think this is why I hear a lot. I heard today, like I enjoy the podcast. I mean, I like you guys, is that we have conversations like this and we can they can listen to this stuff. Yeah. Unpack this stuff and then I have a way when I read that thing, you've turned my head around to like, I didn't even think of those consequences. And that's been great. Thank you, Rob Hahn. Oh, thank you, fabulous Greg Robertson, for allowing us to have this. So anyway, hey, welcome back. Thanks to all of our listeners. Thanks to our sponsors or sponsor. Oh, yeah. I forgot to say, thank you, NoteRouter. I know we're going to have these little burbs at the end, but they've agreed to sponsor another month of Industry Relations podcast. So, hey, Nick and those guys at NoteRouter, come on, NoteRouter.com. Go visit, give them a try, give Nick a call. These guys are awesome. Thank you so much, Nick.
And if you too want to get this level of love from the fabulous Greg Robertson, you should be dropping an email, give him a call. There's more than enough love to go around. So
absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody, and great to see you again. And we'll see you in person next week.
That's right. I'll see you there. All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
I'm so excited to announce our inaugural sponsor of Industry Relations podcast, NoteRouter. NoteRouter was launched back in 2018 by Nick Goff with the mission of reconnecting real estate. NoteRouter is an all-in-one email and texting platform designed exclusively for real estate. NoteRouter syncs with your membership database and makes communicating with your members easier and more effective. Your staff will love you for it. If you're an association or MLS that wants to do a better job of communicating with your members, look no further. NoteRouter has just launched a new website. It looks fantastic. It's NoteRouter.com. I'll put that information in the show notes and take a look. Again, Rob and I want to sincerely thank NoteRouter and Nick Goff for sponsoring this episode of Industry Relations.